Oh, you know what? I think that. Oh, no, I've lost you. Okay, so I'm having technical difficulties with John Murphy. Um, we maybe he's coming back in now. Let's have a look. Are you back there, John? Do you know what happened there? Well, let's give this a go and let's see how it goes. Okay, so I'm going to add you to the screen and hang on a second. There you go. All right, so we should both be live. Look, I just want to give it a second to make sure it shows up before we officially get going.
Okay.
I've got my Facebook page open here. Just want to make sure it's showing in there. So, are you at home or are you in your office?
I'm at the office, and I mean, I've been working 8-10 hours a day and not seeing anybody. So my office is in the basement of the basketball gym. So, you know, on a regular day, I could go most of the day without seeing people. So I'm self-isolating at work, I guess.
Okay, well, all right. Well, I think we're good to go. So let's just start off. I just want to welcome everybody and welcome John here to this chat. I guess, John, the first thing we should do is just, if you can start off and just tell everybody what your background is, what your coaching career has been, starting from, because when I first met you, you were goalkeeper coach at New England Revolution with Steve Nicol was the head coach at the time.
That's right. That's 2002. So it was a long time ago. But yeah, I mean, you know, since then was in MLS for 8 seasons. Went overseas and I was at Livingston in Scotland for a bit, and then went back and I've basically gone back into the college game here in the States. I was at Clemson, I was at Boston College, and now I just finished my 4th season at Georgia Southern, which is just outside of Savannah, Georgia, which is a Division I school down here, 26,000 students. So it's a big Southern school. They take the sport serious. We have great facilities, great weather year round, and you know we've been successful the 4 years that I've been here. So I've really enjoyed it.
So let me just go back a step. How did you end up in Scotland managing? It was Livingston you were managed for a short while.
My mother's
How did you end up there?
Glasgow, and I used to go over there. We used to go probably every other summer throughout the 70s, throughout my childhood, certainly. And I met Craig Brown, who was the national team manager of Scotland in 1996 at the college Final Four in Richmond. He said that I go over and try the B license with the SFA in 1996. So I started going over and doing my coaching badges and went from my B to my A and eventually my pro badge with the Scottish Football Association. So during that time, picked up some great connections, people in the game that I got to know pretty well. One was a young Andreas Villas-Boas, who went on and had a pretty good career for himself. But, you know, guys like Ali McCroy, Terry Butcher, Ian Durant, Paki Bonner, Craig Levine, who was the national team manager for a while. So I had good contacts in the game. And when in MLS, I went over and finished a couple of connected with John Hughes at Falkirk, and that's what opened the door for me to eventually go to Livingston and work with Paul Haggerty, who was a Dundee United legend. So it was a great time, very volatile, but certainly had some great experiences over in Scotland.
Okay, and so now at Georgia Southern, how long have you been there? Did you say 4 years?
Yeah, I just finished my 4th season, and you know, for those, it doesn't really matter what level you're talking about, whether it's you know, youth soccer all the way up to the pros. As we were alluding to before the show started, there's really no downtime. So even though I feel like I've ended my 4th season, I feel like I'm going into my 5th season already. So you got to get up to speed with college sports in regards to recruitment and things like that. So we've been very busy during the off season we lost in the conference quarterfinals in November, and I really feel like we've been going nonstop ever since. So, I feel like I definitely feel more like I'm going into my 5th season than just ending my 4th, if that makes sense.
All right. Well, let's talk about the big thing that going on in the world right now. This pandemic. How has that affected you with like contact with your players and what you're able to do with them and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's frustrating, and I just said to a colleague, I think we all need to be patient with each other because it really is a unique time. We've never been through anything like this as a country, as a civilization worldwide. So very, very unique time, and I think we all have to be patient with each other. We had some kids that were supposed to have online tutoring the past couple of days that have missed tutors, and usually if you do that in person, I'm going to come down on you pretty hard. So we're trying to connect with the guys with WhatsApp and Zoom type meetings, and but you obviously lose the human touch, which is the most important part of being a coach or a teacher. So I think that's the challenge for all of us right now is try to find a way to connect with these kids and motivate them while obviously being off site. So I think we all have a unique opportunity, but when we all get back on the field, we should have a lot more enthusiasm and passion for what we do. If this time away from the pitch isn't going to do it, then it's never going to happen, because I'm dying to get back on the pitch and work with the guys, and I'm hoping my players feel the same way.
Yeah, and it's I talk with coaches all over the place, and especially those that back in the UK, and I think some of those are coming to the realization now that they were hoping they'd get back with their players within a month or so, but it looks like now it could be, they're thinking September and just starting a new season. They're hoping. Yeah. So I don't know. Now we're a little behind them, and we've got a little different situation here, but who knows? Yeah. So how are you dealing with this with your players then, as far as training goes? Like, what kind of, would you be doing any training sessions now? And if you're missing all these training sessions, are you like encouraging your players to do, kind of keep in shape, do some ball work? What, is there anything that you can do?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, one, obviously the NCAA determines the things that we can do, so that they cannot, once this ban is lifted from being outside, at this point, they cannot train with outside groups until the academic year is over. So the NCAA may come up with a waiver for that for the players. What our players have been sent is individual workout package from our strength coach. So obviously they can work out. The number one thing they need to focus on right now is making sure they end the semester academically well, which is obviously the big component of being a student athlete in college. It doesn't matter how good of a player they are, but if they're struggling academically, they're not eligible to play in the fall, then we have a big problem. So they have to focus on their academics. They have an individual workout package from our strength coach. And then what we're hoping is the NCAA is going to come up with a waiver that these guys will be able to train with outside groups before the academic year ends. So maybe in a month or so, when they, when they kind of loosen up the ability to be in groups outside, then the guys can get outside and start training a little bit. But again, because we've never been in this before, we don't know how long it's going to take. I'm hoping everything gets settled by the end of May, but as you alluded to, who knows? We could be all the way through the summer and into September, and then we're going to have to do the best with what we have under the circumstances. I'm hoping our kids aren't going to be coming in looking like the coach and staff. They should be in half decent shape anyway.
Well, the interesting part I find is, eventually we'll get through this situation, but we don't know exactly how long it's going to be. But what is it going to be? What's the world going to look like? What are we going to look like when we get through the other side? How is that going to work? And I just have a feeling that there's going to be a whole lot of new rules and stuff that are going to have to be put in place to allow, like you said, allow your kids to coach with other groups, because it's going to be a different world that we're in than what we're in now.
At the risk of putting politics and government and all those different things. But yeah, I mean, the NCAA could come up with some new ideas and guidelines, and certainly the federal government can do that as well. So, I think that, regardless of how it shakes out, you would think that, the current landscape will take place as it has been. And hopefully small businesses, small clubs, and what we're talking about in particular, small youth clubs or small colleges and universities, don't fall by the wayside because of these tough economic times. So it is a concern for what we do for a living, and I'm hoping that with all the positive growth that's taken place in our country with MLS and with USL and our women's national team, there's a lot of great things going on in our sport. And hopefully this is just a period where we kind of recalibrate a little bit, get through this as healthy as we can as a country, and then start to push on again.
Yeah, sounds about right. So what about, let's look at it from a coaching perspective. So, some people, I'm not locked in yet. I don't know what your situation is there, but some places in the country are locked down and they can't leave their homes. I know all my family and friends in the UK, they're on lockdown, and it looks like it's going to be another few weeks before they're even, allowed to go anywhere further than walking distance from their home. So we're not there yet, but I've got a feeling that's going to be coming to a lot more places in this country. From a coaching perspective, what are you doing with that? Are you looking at that and saying, okay, I've got some time where I can start learning again, I can start looking at stuff, I can, can more education?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really the only thing you can do from a developmental standpoint. But something I have said to a couple of colleagues, this is a good time for all of us as coaches to watch what we eat and to exercise regularly. I mean, we really should have the time to be able to do it. Obviously, as you said, we might be in a lockdown situation in a couple of weeks, but right now, I went for a pretty significant bike ride yesterday, and getting up early in the morning, go for walks with my wife. And there's really no excuse for us as coaches, certainly full-time coaches. We do have that issue. We tend to put everybody else first and ourselves last. We're eating on the run. We're not getting exercise in, and it really is not healthy. So I think it's two things. One, we can focus on some pro development. I've been doing a lot more reading, trying to stay away from the TV, doing a lot more writing in my journal, trying to do some long-term planning for the fall. Again, look at some curriculum and some methods that I utilize and try and tighten those up and sharpen those up. And then the other side of it's the physical and mental well-being. We need to take better care of ourselves, watch what we eat, exercise. So that would be my advice to any coach. I'm really trying to focus on those two things. And then obviously focus on the things that are most important in life, the people that are closest to your friends and family. Because again, we have a tough life. We enjoy what we do for a living, but it takes us away from a lot of holidays, a lot of weekends, a lot of family things. And you certainly can't go out and visit people now, but certainly I'm spending a lot more time playing board games with my son, cards with my wife, and trying to do things like that. So I think all of us can do those things, but certainly as coaches, we have that, that go lifestyle. Sometimes this might be a blessing for us in that regard.
Well, that's kind of one of the things that I'm trying to do with these events. You're the first one we're doing here, coaching discussion with you. But it's like, okay, people are locked in, locked at home. They've got spare time. I see that as good, valuable, time to learn and improve and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, right, let's get a couple of these discussions going and debates going, and we can talk about all kinds of stuff that coaches can maybe look at and watch and learn from, hopefully. So with that.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Okay, well, what I was going to say was, with that being said, let's get on to general coaching stuff now. Because, you're in Georgia. I've never seen your teams play. I don't know what you do. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, do you have a formation that you use? Do you use the 4-3-3 or 3-5-2 or as a consistent basis? Or does that change, on a regular basis?
Well,
and if so, what formation do you use?
Yeah, I've been doing it so long that now I'm starting to see, trends. I kind of laugh at people talking about trends in the game right now, and I laugh because I mean we were doing it 30 years ago, and it was just called something else. So, in regards to like playing in between the lines and getting on the half turn. I mean, we were doing that back in the late 80s. The '86 World Cup. Maradona and Francescoli for Uruguay were great at that, just coming off the center backs and just getting in between the lines and asking a question whether the center back's going to step in or a midfielder comes down. And so I do find that funny. Sometimes we're talking about these new trends with Barcelona or Guardiola, like it's new stuff. And for me, a lot of it is repetitive for the older coaches out there. I've always worked from a foundation of a back four and two midfield screeners. That's usually the way I work. There's been times like last year, for example, we had two very good strikers, so we ended up going 3-5-2 quite a bit. So we did go to a back three, and then you utilize those two screeners in front, whether it's two center backs or three center backs, to help in transition moments when you've lost the ball and your center back has to go wide to deal with the ball in behind the fullback, that type of thing. So I think that those are things that are kind of tried and true with me, but I've always tried to utilize the players that I've had. I like being an attacking coach. I've tended to, to play with attacking players. So even if it's a 4-2-3-1, which is a formation that I like, the three underneath the center forward are very fluid. So, they're either joining in or getting beyond the center forward, or coming inside to allow the fullbacks to get forward. So I think you do need to work with your players and understand where your strengths are in that regards, particularly in a college setting. You can recruit and you can have a format on how you like to recruit, but it really does change almost from year to year. That's why I think the better teams are the teams that have a core group for 2-3 years. And the top teams in the country tend to have that. So it's something that we're still rebuilding next year.
Let me just ask you.
We had some players that we lost 2 years ago. So.
Okay, let me ask you this question. Do you have and I ask a lot of coaches this question, and do you have like a different setup, a different lineup when you're attacking, a different lineup when you're defending? Like when I played, when I coached and I was coaching kids, I because I'm from England and that's all I knew growing up was the 4-4-2. I used to use a 4-4-2 for the most part. But when we attacked, I would change it to a 2-4-4. So I used to have two center backs who were just as fast and as aggressive as anything, and we could take risks at the youth level. And we used to go 2-4-4, and then when we defended, it would be 4-4-2. So it was like having two extra players. I just used to ask a lot of my two wide players. Yeah. When we were attacking, they were wingers. When we're defending, they were fullbacks, and they have to go up and down the field. Does your lineup change when you're attacking or when you're defending?
Yeah, it's funny. We're talking with our staff last week, and I've never done it that way. I think I've always worked. So say you play a 4-2-3-1, and things are going your way. Those two wide players tend to loosen up and push on, and it looks more like a 4-3-3. When things aren't going well, a 4-2-3-1, you wing off, and then it becomes like a 4-5-1. So I've never looked at it that way, but certainly that's the way the trends are going right now, where people have a different shape in the attack and then a different shape in defending. It's definitely a trend in the game.
Well, the way I did it, John, was like I said, the team that I'm thinking of, and I coached lots of different youth teams, but the one particular team, I used to have two wide players, and they were so athletic and fast and strong. They could get up and down the field, they all the time. Trying to mark those players was just tough. And so it was like having two extra players because, like I said, we attacked and they were wingers. We defended, they were back with the fullbacks. But I always thought that kind of gave me an advantage. Now you can only do it. I could only do it with those players. I had other teams where I didn't have players that had the ability to do it.
Well, that's it. And I.
So, okay.
Yeah, like I tell my kids, it's not what you do, it's how you do it, and that's absolutely right on. You have to have the players to be able to play in that manner, and it's the players that make the game. It's the players that make the formation. I think that's the key to it. And obviously, you can't play with a back three if your center backs are very slow, and there's no use of playing with wingers if you don't have people in central areas to get on the end of crosses. So you do have to cut your cloth accordingly based on your skill sets.
Okay, well, let's talk about, let's move on now to a little bit about the kind of game that you like to play, style of play, if you like. Do you, because right now we've got this abundance of teams, Guardiola has kind of shown it above everything, that just, and Spain, they just keep possession like crazy. And that is one style that's kind of just big time in the pros right now. What's your style of play that you do? And we'll talk about the pros in a little bit, but what about how do you describe how you play with your team or how you would like to play?
I don't think my teams have changed over the years. I've always put out attacking teams. I've always wanted to win and win well. I think you got to use the ball well. I think what we're getting, though, I think people are taking like the example of Barcelona or Guardiola. I think people are extreme, and what we're losing now, inability to hit passes over distance, receive balls over distance, and I'm seeing that a lot now. You have kids coming into the college game, and they have a real inability to hit or receive balls over distance, and I always felt that was a real big indicator for players moved up levels, and you alluded to the pro level. A lot of these college kids going into the pros, that's what they struggle with is, the ability and the consistency that a professional player can hit a ball and eliminate 4 to 6 players with one pass. And I think we have to be careful that we're not going too far into, taking a form of play, which is obviously very easy on the eyes, and applying it to every level of football. I think with younger kids, we have to obviously focus on technique, their enjoyment of the ball, and their confidence with the ball gets better. The head comes up. Now you can see the field. And now you can make better decisions. But I think once you start getting, 13, 15, 17, it doesn't matter what gender. I really do think our range of pass and our ability to connect and link with people in tight quarters, but also our ability to be able to pick a head up and to see a pass, miss out an option, play a bigger ball is important. And my teams have always tried to play that way. So I don't think the ball up in the air or being kicked all over the place is conducive in today's game. I think the games are being refereed in a way that gives the advantage to the attacking team. So I think you must use the ball well, but there has to be a mix and a balance. And I'd like to think my teams have played that way over the years.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about training sessions a little bit. Just so that other coaches can get an idea. What are your? I'm not looking at like how you set up training sessions, but what are your favorite kind of training sessions? What do you enjoy doing? How do you set up? What do kids enjoy doing?
I'm trying to remember where I heard it or where I thought about it. But my mother's a teacher, my sister's a teacher, my wife's a teacher. So I don't know if this came maybe from them subconsciously, but I've always tried to sandwich sessions. I've always tried to sandwich activities within a session. And what I mean by that is, within a week, Monday through Friday, if you're practicing every day, you have a player-centered session, and then the next day is a little bit more of a coach-centered section, and then you go back to a player-centered session, and that type of work. So obviously a player-centered session is, boxes, passing routines, small-sided game, crossing and finishing. I mean, every player around the world loves that. And obviously, it's a great way to train. And if you're only training, twice a week, you certainly have to have at least one session like that. But then there's also times that we have to, do 11 aside type tactics, either in a phase of play, some shadow training. If you have enough players, play 2 or 3 10-minute games of 11v11 and focus on certain tactical aspects. And that's more of a coach-centered session, set pieces, that type of thing. So I've always tried to balance it where you're not doing too many of those sessions in a row. And it certainly can't be just roll the balls out and let's have fun every day either. There has to be that balance. So I've tried to sandwich my work in that way over a week. And then within a training session, in a similar mindset where you really need to start off with something enjoyable for a warm up, get them going, a lot of fun. I still play a lot of handball for warm up. I think it's a great way to get the kids going, especially on a cold day, and then move into something maybe a little bit more functional. And then obviously you go from simple to complex, smaller to bigger. And, you try and have a thread run through your set training session. I think that's important. Another concept that I've come up with, I've come across with some of the physical education teachers I've worked with over the years, is the concept of stack. So we have a training session, but one of my assistants is focusing on one particular part of the game. Other assistants focusing on something completely different. Third assistant is focusing on something different. So my kids are constantly getting feedback from coaches. You have one coach talking about defending, you have one coach talking about transition moments, and you have one coach talking about linking and possessing, because you can't just have one session on passing or one session on defending. You really have to use your time wisely, because we're all limited with the amount of time that we have. So that stacking concept is something I got from a friend of mine who's a phys ed teacher and more of a basketball mindset. So those are things I think that are just, basic things that I like to do with training. I worked with an Englishman years ago, and he showed me something that I've been doing for years, and it's basically 3 games to 3, and it's best using a small sided game, which the first game is unlimited touches, first team to 3 goals. Second game, 2 touch, 3 goals. Last game, 1 touch, 3 goals, and then go back to unlimited touches for your fourth game. And again, it depends on the level that you're working with, but I guess it's that type of methodology that you can use that will sharpen up connections, increase speed of play, kind of get the foundation of the things that you want as a coach. So at the end of the day, the kids have to want to play for you. They have to enjoy what you're doing. So it can't be serious and dry all the time. You really need to find a way to balance out that work.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to. I do have one other question for you before we move on to the pro game. Within a game, so you're playing a game, you're up against another team, and things are not going well. And how often do you need to make, or do you find yourself making tactical changes in a game? So maybe you change the shape, or you drop an extra player back, or add an extra player up front. How often do you see does that happen?
I think in the modern game it happens a lot, and unfortunately in the college game, because of the number of substitutions, the shape and the tempo can change quite a bit. I think what you do is you have a preconceived notion of how the game's going to go. So, the easy one is when you're playing against an inferior team and you've perceived them as an inferior team. You go out there and you're playing well and things are going well. And then obviously as a coach, you don't want to change it. You just want to sustain it. On the other hand, there's also a straightforward situation when you go to Wake Forest and they're number 1 in the country, and they're going to have most of the ball, and it's going to be a smash and grab job, and you're going to have to hit them on the break, and you start the game, very subdued and very deep, and they have to break you down. Those are straightforward situations where you don't have to make a coaching change. I think where, it gets tricky is where the game is started. You have a preconceived notion of what the game was going to be, and it changes. And now the other team has really on top of you, and it can be unsettling for your group. So in the college game, what you can do is you can make a substitution, and that can calm things down a little bit. Where maybe you have a central midfielder who starts the game, who's just not getting up to speed with what's going on, and you make a substitution. You either put a more athletic player in there, or you bring a wide player inside, and then you replace the wide player with another winger. But in the college game, you can make those changes before halftime. In the pro game, obviously, you are rarely making a substitution before halftime. It would have to be an injury or an extreme situation to do that. But that leads me to my next point, which is halftime. Halftime is really where coaches earn their money. That's really where you and your staff have to have an assessment of what happened in the first half. If things are going well, how do we keep it going? We have to expect a response from the other team. Or if things aren't going well, what do we need to do to change it? Obviously, get the kids in the right mindset. If they need to get encouraged and get some confidence, then you have to change your tone. If they need a rocket and they're not playing well, then you need to go in a little hot. But halftime is really where you earn your money as a college coach, I feel. And then you go into the second half, and it's the same thing. You look and see how it starts, first 10, 15 minutes, and then you're using that last 20 to 30 minutes. You're using your subs to either shorten the game, slow the game down, or lengthen the game and speed the game up. So the college game, in some ways, is a little bit more complicated than the college game. You just have the three subs, and they have to be used sparingly. And the college game, it can be quite volatile and quite fluid.
Yeah, and I guess that's same in the youth game as well. Even more so, they've got to, they, depending on what league you're playing in and what level you're playing at, you've got multiple subs that you can use. So yeah, interesting stuff. Okay, well, let's talk now about the pro game, John. I'll be upfront and I'll say I'm not really a fan of Pep Guardiola and his style of play.
No.
Because I kind of find it a little boring, especially when they're so good. Like when he was at Barcelona and they used to play teams, it'd be like watching a practice game of offense against defense. And for the amount of passes they make compared to the number of goal chances they attempt or get, is just too much for me, watching people just pass the ball around without many goal chances. Yeah. So I'll be upfront, I'm a big fan of Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah.
I just love their attacking, aggressive style. And to me, that is more fun to watch. It's more spectator friendly. But yeah. I think I'm in the minority. I think more people are more impressed and like, Guardiola's short passing deal. So what about you? What do you think of the pro game, where it's at, and the different styles they've got?
Yeah, I think we have to be aware of the unintended consequences of how the game is being officiated. And that comes from FIFA. That's not a knock on American referees. I think there's an unintended consequences of trying to, make it more safe for top players and try to protect top players. But, I know you have a little bit of a Leeds background. I mean, the Leeds teams in the 70s, when they were really at their best, they had the combination of the hardness, but they also had the real skill, and I think it was hard to break teams down. I'm old enough to remember in the old days. The first 5 minutes we had a shot at their best guy, and they had a shot at our best guy, and then the game would kind of settle down a little bit. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make, when you take away the hard tackles and the physical play, now defenders are afraid to jump in and to get physical because they're going to get booked. Forget about being red carded, and what's happening now is you're kind of losing a little bit of that the part of football or soccer that we enjoy, and I have to agree with you. I'm a little bit more of a guy who likes to press. I've always tried to be higher up the field, and that was those Ajax teams in the early 90s. I was a big fan of during my younger years as a coach, and AC Milan in the late 80s. And so I tend to agree with you in regards to style of play and pressing and speeding the game up. To be fair to Barcelona or Man City or teams that tend to play that way, you do have teams that drop off very, very deep, and they're hard to break down, and you have to use the ball and shift them and move them. But I've never criticized the coach for how they want to set up. I've coached against teams that play very, very direct. I've played against teams that try and pass you off the park. And, for me, that's up to the coach, how he wants to play. I'm going to implement my style of play as best I can. And, I think beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But I can't disagree with you. I think we've lost a little bit in regards to physical play. Even goalkeeping, for example, you start to see, these split saves, which when I was playing, we were encouraged not to do save with our feet. We were encouraged to come and come forward and save with our hands and try and take the ball off the striker's feet. And it's a really exciting technique when it's done well, and you rarely see it anymore. So I think there's unintended consequences to the way the game has been called, and FIFA over time in trying to protect the skillful player. They may have taken some of the physical play out, which really makes soccer a fascinating game. There has to be something for a skillful player, but there's also athletic, hard working players that have a place in soccer as well. So maybe that's where that's emanated from. I'm not sure.
Well, I think that part of that is because the game has got a lot more athletic now. The players can run faster. Players are faster, quicker, sharper, and so tackles. A bad tackle can be, how can I put it? More violent. It can have more consequences than it did in the old days. When you look back at some of the players we talked about, I used to watch the Leeds teams of old. Like Billy Bremner probably wouldn't be able to play in today's game because he was a short, podgy kind of guy. And now you've got to be an athlete to be able to play. So I guess that has some effect to it. But from a spectator point of view, let's just forget coaching. From a spectator point of view, who do you enjoy watching these days?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you with Liverpool, and I think that's an easy one. Obviously, with their success winning the Champions League last year and coming close in the league, and obviously if you're not a Liverpool supporter, then you're going to be a little biased. But I support Celtic. I always have. I don't have an English team. I've tended to gravitate towards the English teams that had Scottish players. So Leeds was always an interesting one for me, and obviously Liverpool and Man United have a history with Scottish players as well. But I look at the English league really as a fan, and I have a team that I support. But in regards to style of play, you have to certainly respect the way Klopp has Liverpool playing at the moment, which is very, very, very exciting, very high paced. I thought Pochettino at Tottenham when things were going well for them looked good, and where they are in the current state, and with Mourinho, it just shows you how humbling this game is. Because obviously 10 years ago, Mourinho was the hottest property going, and it just shows guys like Alex Ferguson, guys that did it for a long time. They've found a way to adapt over time, and I think that's something that I find is at the heart of my work. How can I connect more effectively with these kids that I'm working with, whether they're college kids, pro kids, and find effective ways of communicating? Because, like I said earlier in this interview, I think there's trends that are coming back to what was going on in the 80s. And they're talking about them now like they're new things, but they're not new things. But what is new is dealing with the 21st century athlete and how to connect with those people. So that's where I think Klopp's humanness. Klopp seems like the kind of person you would run through a brick wall for, and that's a great quality that he has. And you look at someone like Mourinho, and now, unfortunately, looks maybe a little, tired and dour. And again, that's where you got to give it to someone like Alex Ferguson, where he really did change, 3-4 teams in a 30-year period and found effective ways of connecting. So I really look at, English football. I enjoy German football. I think it's a very honest league, very high-paced league. But I certainly look at those leagues as a fan and obviously as a student of the game. And then I try and watch Celtic as much as I can, and try and watch Scottish football as much as I can. So, which is difficult now. You really don't have the connection We used to have the Fox Soccer channel. We had a lot more. It seemed like we had a lot more of that kind of football on TV. And now you got to find ways to get it on the internet, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Hey, there is one thing that I do want to mention. Have you seen much of now? So my home team is I'm from Sheffield, and the team that I supported growing up was Sheffield United. They're my team. They have who I think now is probably the best up and coming British coach in the league, Chris Wilder. He's doing pretty impressive things with Sheffield United. Have you seen much of those? Have you seen much of them play?
I have, and Alan Nill is his assistant, and I got to know Alan over the years. Alan was at Rotherham, probably the turn of the 21st century, 2002, 2003, when we first met. So I've tried to follow Alan's career, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you're talking about a real expansive, fluid football. And again, I think there's use of, some people use pivots. Some people try and overload areas, getting in between the lines. But I've been saying this for 20 years. I think, the concept of, overlapping center backs. I mean, what's the difference between having a center back come up for an attacking set piece and having a center back, step forward into the attack during the run of play? You still have to have cover. And obviously, there's a volatility of a transition moment, but you have the same type of problem when a center back comes up for an attacking corner. So I think that what they've done is they've taken some basic concepts and just kind of modernized a little bit. Again, when I was playing in the mid '80s, you play sweeper. You step into the midfield, and sometimes used to even get into the final third. So I think you're seeing a little bit of that from Sheffield United, and a little bit more fluid, free flowing in regards to positions. And as long as people know what they're doing and people are coming in and covering to protect themselves for either losing the ball or retaining the ball, it all comes down to the player. So obviously they have a good mix of a tactical scheme and the right players to be able to perform it.
Well, he may have got the right players, but the players that he's got, the quality of them is the way I would describe it, he's getting more out of his players than what I think other coaches would be. He's got if you look at the quality of his players or the payroll of his players, and he's got them right on the verge of qualifying for Europe almost. And I've watched a lot of their games this season. And they've played Man City and they've played Liverpool, and there's a wide gulf in the quality of players. And there's you watch the game, and obviously Liverpool and Man City are the better teams, and they're having more of the play. But geez, Sheffield United give them some tough times. They make him work hard to be able to get through that game, and I'm really impressed with those guys. And I'm just concerned that that he stays at Sheffield United, being a Sheffield United fan. But he's got, like you said, the overlapping fullbacks is something that nobody else is using. It'd be interesting to see if he's able to get better quality players, what he's able to do.
Yeah, I didn't mean to accuse you of being a Leeds supporter. I knew your dad was coaching there, so I knew you had a connection with the club. But I know you're a Sheffield man.
No, I'm a Leeds fan as well.
Yeah, I don't want to accuse you of being a Leeds fan. No, but I think that's what Brian Clough had at Forest, and I think for Forest in 1979, 1980 to win the European Cup with that team is it's probably the best. It's probably up, it probably nicks Leicester winning the Premier League a couple of years ago, and it just goes back to good coaching. So whether it's Clough or another coach, it comes down to getting the players to play for you, and sometimes you can get. Sometimes you can get a guy that maybe isn't highly rated, but you have a system and a plan that works for him. He fits in, and then you're getting the best version of that player. So, I think you're absolutely right. And I think people enjoy seeing that. They enjoy seeing, Sheffield United doing well, cutting their cloth accordingly. Obviously, Leicester did it a couple of years ago. And then, like I said, Forest, back in the 70s and 80s is a perfect example of really having a bunch of what some people might consider ragtag players, and he turned them into European champions. It comes down to coaching. The players get it done on the field, but the coach has to create the environment.
I think Chris Wilder is the guy. I'm really impressed by him, and I'm going to be real interested to see how his career goes over the next 5-10 years, and if he stays or moves, but how well he does, because he seems to be one of these guys who's pretty inventive and clued in. Yeah. And so it'll be interesting to see. So anyway, John, I think we better call it a day. We don't want to drag on too much time. So I really appreciate you joining me, and this was the first one we did. So technically, I know we were fighting at the beginning to get it done. Hopefully, everything went okay. And but yeah, thanks again for doing this, John. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you. Had great connection with you and World Class Coaching for, like I said, almost 20 years now, and the website, the books, all the different things you've done for the game to really help the game in this country. I appreciate it. I know a lot of people feel the same way. So very happy to work with you. And I still have 2 books with World Class Coaching. I still think they're pretty good books, great concepts, and hopefully people will look into them.
I will. You know what? I'll show these books just as we end. Yeah, you've got 2 goalkeeping books, great books. So again, all right. Well, thanks again, John, and we'll keep in touch. And best of luck for whenever the season starts again.
That's right. Stay healthy, everybody.
All right. We'll see you, John.
All right. Bye-bye.